This is the narration of an article found at beginningofsorrows.org. It was recently announced that Grace Community Church, headed by the ever-diatrophetic John MacArthur, was slated to host the Gospel Coalition's West Coast Conference, Enduring Faithfulness, this October. This posed quite the dilemma for popular polemics blog Pulpit and Pen, as they have been outspoken critics of the Gospel Coalition and its unbiblical nature, but have unwaveringly supported John MacArthur and all of his pharisaical folly by negligence, disregard, and willful blindness. One erroneous stipulation manufactured by the Hardy Boys at Pulpit and Pen to justify error was that John MacArthur was not hosting conferences with these people at his church, despite the fact that he partnered with them elsewhere. This was the last thread of imagined justification they were clinging to, and when news broke that John MacArthur was hosting the Gospel Coalition in his own house, as it were, they were in a bit of a predicament. You see, J.D. Hall of Pulpit and Pen believes that John MacArthur will be taken home in a, quote, fiery chariot, end quote. He actually said this. He also believes that John MacArthur is venerable, great, and really awesome, according to one of his more recent Polemics Report podcasts. Given his infatuation with MacArthur and apparent disdain for the Gospel Coalition, it comes as no surprise that he was faced with quite the dilemma, as rebuking John MacArthur is simply not an option for him or his underlings. JD and his team sent an email, presumably to his friend, Phil Johnson, and voiced their concern on the heels of several articles exposing this dilemma, including one written by this author. In the wake of the concerned emails and articles about MacArthur's partnerships in hosting what JD calls a Marxist organization, Grace Community Church decided against hosting the event at their facility. Phil Johnson, executive director of Grace to You, made the announcement in an April 5, 2018 tweet saying, "The website for the Gospel Coalition's West Coast Conference has not been revised yet, but those planning to attend need to know that it will not be held at Grace Community Church. I'm sorry, but I have no information yet on what the new venue will be." One lingering question left conspicuously unasked by the boys at Pulpit and Pen is why the conference was sanctioned there in the first place. Because this looks rather like a celebrity "I got caught so I'll go to rehab" episode. These conferences are planned months and usually over a year in advance, which means that the Gospel Coalition didn't presumptuously announce that the conference would be hosted by Grace Community Church, but they must have already agreed upon it. Given this, John MacArthur's team principally agreed with the Gospel Coalition and only retracted the agreement due to public relations. This is a stunt. Pulpit and Pen were quick to point out that the leadership at the church had concerns from the moment the announcement was made, saying, sources also reveal that Grace Community Church leadership was concerned almost as soon as the public pronouncement of the conference by the Gospel Coalition was made, long before any criticism of Grace Community Church was made public. As Johnson said in his pre-Easter tweet, patience was requested over Resurrection Weekend to allow communication between the church and the Gospel Coalition, and to settle the matter in an amicable way. We are pleased that Grace Community Church and the always admirable Dr. John MacArthur will not be taking part in the Gospel Coalition's West Coast Conference. But this makes no sense. It would be so grossly negligent on the part of an internationally known ministry hosting a conference to presume a facility would be available on a specific date without ever inquiring, as to be utterly unworthy of a second thought. They had planned with the elders of Grace Community Church to host the conference, a conference at which MacArthur is still slated to speak, and only changed plans in an attempt to assuage the frustration of some of their benefactors. Their conclusion, as you can see, is that MacArthur remains, quote, always admirable, end quote, and they are pleased that he will not be taking part in the conference, even though he still is. They are pleased because they seem to believe the Gospel Coalition is full of Marxist heretics, but as you'll shortly see, they either don't know what they believe or these men are playing a con game. There is no middle ground. There seems to be zero integrity behind the ministries of the Gospel Coalition, Pulpit and Pen, or Grace to You. So what are J.D. Hall's thoughts on the Gospel Coalition? He said this in his April 6th podcast, quote, "They are not a religious organization. They are, in my opinion, a political organization. They are funded by Marxists. They push Marxist ideology, intersectionality, critical race theory, cultural Marxism, and economic Marxism, and its leader and founder, Tim Keller, is a part of that." This is a correct assessment, but the duplicity at Pulpit and Pen knows no bounds. They suffer from trickle-down dereliction, it seems, the issue beginning with J.D. Hall himself. From Russell Moore to Tim Keller, the Gospel Coalition is fraught with unbiblical wolves. But let's take a closer look at exactly who comprises the Gospel Coalition. This should go without saying, but understand that organizations stand or fall on the substance of those who comprise them. Without people who espouse certain ideas, the Gospel Coalition would simply be an acronym on an otherwise blank website. This is evident. If there were no people, there would be no Gospel Coalition. As the Mormon Church is the Mormon Church because of its members and their beliefs, so the Gospel Coalition is the Gospel Coalition solely because of its members and their collective beliefs. They are the Gospel Coalition. But who are they? We'll list their names here so we become familiar with them. Here are some of their council members. Ligon Duncan, Tabidi Anabwile, whom J.D. Hall calls a racist Marxist, Alistair Begg, H.B. Charles Jr., close personal friend of John MacArthur, Mark Dever, partner of Russell Moore, Kevin DeYoung, embracer of Francis Chan, Tim Keller, the one J.D. warned us about, Albert Mohler, friend of Rick Warren, John Piper, promoter of Rick Warren, the Passion Conference, and Carl Lentz, David Platt, promoter of Francis Chan, and Russell Moore, whom J.D. Hall says is, quote, of the devil, end quote. These are core council members of the Gospel Coalition and therefore the very heart of all that the Gospel Coalition is and stands for. Given that one of these members is considered to be of the devil by J.D. Hall, I have a question. Is it okay to be in a coalition or alliance with the devil? I'll defer to 2 Corinthians 6:14, Amos 3:3, and 2 John verse 11. The obvious answer is no. All of these men endorse each other, obviously, as they are part of a coalition together. A Marxist organization with devils means everyone who is a part of it is partaking in their sinister ploys. This would explain the concern many people had, including Pulpit and Pen themselves. But as you're going to see soon, the concern has only just begun. Please join us in this Dickensian journey of a conference carol. Let us go with the ghost of conference past to the 2018 Shepherds Conference, hosted by John MacArthur himself and Grace Community Church. The conference concluded just 1 month ago, March 11th, 2018, and is perhaps the mecca of conferences for Reformed Calvinists. This year, they even gave a free preacher's Bible to all who attended. Well, free if you disregard the $300 registration fee, but I digress. You can expect most of the same names from year to year. Do any of these guys look familiar to you? Let's list them again just to see if our memories are jogged. H.B. Charles Jr., Albert Mohler, Ligon Duncan, and Mark Dever. Do you see what I see? That's right. 4 council members of the Gospel Coalition partnered with John MacArthur and spoke at his church a month ago. What about their doctrine or stance has changed in the last month? Answer? Nothing. These are the same men they have been, promoting the same garbage they have been. It seems Johnny Mac has no problem partnering with the Gospel Coalition whatsoever because, as has been established, the people are the Gospel Coalition, and he is with those people. John MacArthur's own partners are members of the Gospel Coalition. Never mind the conference name, we know who these men are. Marxists, according to J.D. Hall, that is. But let's continue with the ghost of conference present. April 11th, 2018 to be exact. The Together for the Gospel Conference, or T4G, is hosted by Albert Mohler every year in Louisville, Kentucky. The same people basically have been speaking together there for the past 12 years, including John MacArthur. Let's see who's on the roster this year, shall we? David Platt, Albert Mohler, John Piper, Ligon Duncan, Kevin DeYoung, Mark Dever, Tabidi Anabwile, H.B. Charles. Wow, that's 8 council members from the Gospel Coalition that MacArthur is united together with at Together for the Gospel. Also, Matt Chandler is a recommended author and partner with the Gospel Coalition, as well as other heretical groups such as the Passion Conference with Louis Giglio, the Pope Kisser. C.J. Mahaney has been accused of covering up child sex abuse in his church, in which he and another pastor told the mother of a 3-year-old girl who was molested not to call the cops. The boy accused was convicted, and the civil lawsuit against Mahaney was dismissed on a technicality. Due to the bad publicity still rightly haunting him, he has withdrawn from this year's engagement, but not one of the men pictured here has confronted the issue or held him accountable. Why would they? After all, he co-founded this very conference. The business of business produces all manner of evil, the love of money. Are you beginning to see a disgusting pattern here? John MacArthur is entrenched in intimate partnerships with the very same Gospel Coalition people he and Pulpit and Pen claim he distances himself from. This is an out-and-out lie. Phil Johnson of Grace to You is complicit in this lie and has borne overt false witness in the matter. If the men that comprise the Gospel Coalition are so bad and worthy of being separated from, why is MacArthur not canceling his Together for the Gospel engagement? They are nearly all members of the Gospel Coalition as well. Together for the Gospel is simply an alias for the Gospel Coalition. The same council members comprise it. But wait, there's more. The ghost of conference future has a woeful vision for us indeed. This will take us all the way to September of 2018, to the home of the Grand Ole Opry. That's right, Nashville, Tennessee. This September, the Getty Music Worship Conference, better known as Sing 2018, will be hosted by Keith and Kristen Getty. Of course, John MacArthur will be there, but who will be joining him? Let's take a look, shall we? What do we have here? Alistair Begg, John Piper, and Timothy Keller, the founder of the Gospel Coalition himself. Not to mention Ligon Duncan, John MacArthur's longtime friend and Gospel Coalition council member. Let's also mention that Ravi Zacharias has no official position on Catholicism and participates in ecumenical conferences such as Together 2016, in which Pope Francis himself gave the opening remarks. The Christian rap artist Trip Lee, pictured with MacArthur, regularly tours with Hillsong and Jesus Culture. That's right, New Apostolic Reformation entrenched Jesus Culture and Word of Faith heretics Hillsong united. Trip Lee is a staple in their outcry conferences, and there's John MacArthur without a care in the world. I should mention that Trip Lee also spoke with John MacArthur at the Together for the Gospel conference as well. It seems John MacArthur has such a habit of partnering with the Gospel Coalition that I fail to see how he's not a member himself at this point. J.D. Hall describes Tim Keller as a Marxist, and here John MacArthur partners with him openly. If we are to take Pulpit and Pen seriously, in that we should all be aware of the Gospel Coalition and commend MacArthur for withdrawing the facilities, then they need to urge him to remove himself from Together for the Gospel as well as the Sing Conference, and disinvite several people from the Shepherds Conference. Given that the people who comprise the Gospel Coalition are the Gospel Coalition, John MacArthur has not only not dissociated himself from the Gospel Coalition, but has been and apparently will continue to partner with and endorse them. Phil Johnson of Grace to You and his team thought they could get one over on us because they retracted the use of their facilities, but let's get one thing clear. Location is irrelevant. Is adultery any less adultery if you commit it at a motel instead of your home? What an idiotic postulation, but some will still make it. Does God dwell in temples built with hands? Sola Scriptura, please. No, God is not at all concerned with location, but rather substance. Locations sanctify nothing. The thing that warranted Moses removing his sandals was not some special plot of land with a special bush and a special location. It was the very presence of God himself that made that ground holy. A prison was an awful place to be in the first century, but Paul and Silas were in communion with God there, and even the other prisoners were compelled to listen to them. The fact is this: John MacArthur is a partner with the Gospel Coalition and all it stands for. The proverbial wool is being pulled over your eyes here. J.D. Hall knows this information and has deliberately chosen to neglect it because he is in the business of business and loves to play games in order to raise his own stock. Next to inventing straw man arguments, his favorite game to play is called partiality in judgment. J.D. and Pulpit and Pen know that John MacArthur is doing this because he is on tape saying this.
And I have no problem saying publicly, I think that John MacArthur's wrong for going Together for the Gospel.
Right.
I have said that privately.
Right.
To Phil. But I have no problem saying it publicly.
And yet, he continues to act as if it never happened. As MacArthur continues to partake in Together for the Gospel, and J.D. Hall remains publicly silent. Not only is John MacArthur playing the hypocrite in this absurd scheme, but so are Phil Johnson, his cover-up and public relations guy, Todd Friel, his pseudo-comedic promotion man, and J.D. Hall, the self-defeating, shameless sycophant who sees himself as something of a sentry. The willingness to cover up what they know to be egregious error, except when they are forced to address it because it looks so bad that several monetary contributors finally noticed, is a testament to the fact that they are destitute of integrity. Rather than telling you the whole truth, as was just shared here, Pulpit and Pen wrote this garbage half-truth as if nobility had prevailed, knowing full well that MacArthur was wholeheartedly embracing the same people at other conferences. What a joke. JD followed his article up with a podcast titled, "John MacArthur is Still the Man. Behold the Fruit of Idolatry." While Pulpit and Pen tout themselves as the, quote, Rolex of discernment blogs, as I've said before, this level of negligence ought to be compared to a knockoff Casio from a carnival. I believe we have crossed the line from negligent to fraudulent at this point. They know exactly what is going on and refuse to accurately and honestly report about it. Hypocrites, the whole lot. They are willing to carry on the con game as long as you'll let them. They will establish confederacies in evil if it means elevating their brand, maintaining the status quo, and garnering followers for their respective ministries while maintaining an apparent air of orthodoxy. Ah, the modern-day Pharisee. Filled with hypocrisy and deceit, this self-serving, self-preserving mentality is the antithesis of all things biblical and is emblematic of a complete disregard for holiness and truth and therefore Christ himself. God help them and all who defend them unabashedly. A more strict judgment awaits those who should have known better. Woe upon woe, God help them. It appears John MacArthur is still slated to speak at the conference despite withdrawing his facilities, but even if he weren't, John MacArthur has been and continues to openly partner with no less than 10 council members from the Gospel Coalition on a regular basis. Wretched Radio, Grace to You, Pulpit and Pen, Pirate Christian Radio. They are all deceiving the people in order to maintain their sphere of influence, as they are dependent upon those who idolize John MacArthur to give them money. They ride his wave. This evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. Anyone who continues to justify this is suffering from a blindness so great that Stevie Wonder would pity them.